my picture right now. And in the middle we have Markus Börner. He is working at Prequel Ventures. Markus, hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right. And next we have Hope Jeter from Responsibly. Hope, welcome.
Hi.
So Hope is a stand-in for Thomas, who couldn't make it because of some unfortunate personal matters. So with me, I have Hope as a spokesperson for Responsibly. So some household things, and then we kick off about talking about startups. Everybody is on mute, the audience, but feel free to ask questions along the way. So on the right-hand side, you see the Q&A functionality, and there's a chat function you can use, but please use the Q&A so I can track down the questions. You can even vote on the questions. And later on, we have a Q&A at the end. So I will make sure that if the questions are in line of the conversation I will be having with Hope and Markus, I will ask these questions immediately. And if not, I will reserve these questions until the end. But next, we have also 30 minutes afterwards. So we have an aftertalk. So at 5 o'clock CET, we'll be in the lounge. So Hope, Markus, and myself will be sitting at table 1. So you can join us to have some more questions and further conversation about the stuff we'll be talking about and some other questions. So feel free to join us over there. Before we get to the topic at hand, Hope, first a small question. So for you about the background. So you are responsible for, you are Chief Product Officer at Responsibly. But can you tell me a bit background? So what did you study and how did you came to this place and since when?
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, I'm based out of Stockholm, and as Martin said, Chief Product Officer for Responsibly, which is a sustainability analytics platform. I joined the team about a year ago, and my journey actually started studying operations research engineering in school. So a big supply chain emphasis back then. And then I kind of went into other industries during my career, but now have somehow come full circle and rediscovered the interesting challenges in this space that are really fun to work with and find solutions for.
Okay. Thanks. We get to you back later. But now I will switch off the camera so you can enlarge your screen and the PowerPoint to have a better view on it. And later on, we will get back to on camera. So next, Markus, can you tell me about Prequel Ventures, what you're doing, and then we get to the phase you're in right now?
Yeah, of course. Happy to do so. So actually, I'm here today with like kind of two hats. So on the first hand, with Prequel Ventures, we invest in supply chain startups in their very early stages. So we are building a venture capital firm which is currently in its setup phase and we are interested in supply chain transparency, sustainability topics, but also circularity and how to make supply chains more resilient. And on the other hand, what we do is we operate a platform called SCM-Startups.com. And what we do there goes hand in hand what we do with Prequel Ventures. We monitor the European market of supply chain startups. That means we track a lot of companies, and we've built a database with now over 400 startups. And we help these startups to gain visibility. And on the other hand, we help corporate customers to get in touch with startups, get corporations going, and during this process, we of course collect a lot of data points that generate interesting insights.
So why did you start, you and Mathias? This is Prequel Ventures. Why a seed fund in supply chain specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are big believers in vertical venture capital funds, and we think that in logistics and supply chain, access to the market is a huge problem for startups. So the market is very fragmented, and it's sometimes hard to get a grip on it, right? And what we do as vertical investors is we have a good network on the corporate side as well, on the side of established players, which are customers or cooperation partners for startups, and we use this to make interest for our portfolio companies, but also use their expertise, so the expertise of encumbrance in the market, to see where new business models can be built and in which direction the market goes. So we kind of leverage both sides, and by doing this, believe that we can add much value to our portfolio companies and eventually make better investment decisions.
Yeah, and I have tracked down the startup scene in the Silicon Valley and also in Europe in the last 5 years. We'll get to that later on. But what I have seen, there's so much money around in the US, in Silicon Valley, and if you compare it to Europe, it's very much harder to get a grasp on funding here in Europe, and that is also something that you can recognize, or not, Markus?
Yeah, definitely, and especially when we look at supply chain and you look at the European landscape, so there is a few generalist funds, agnostic funds that invest in the space, but there is no specialists. There's a few corporate venture capital funds, but what you see in the US is a few funds specializing on supply chain, specializing on easing the access for startups. You have Dynamo Ventures there, you have Supply Chain Ventures there, and also a few others, and we have a huge gap there in Europe. So we have a funding gap in general, but when it comes to supply chain management and logistics, the gap widens a little bit, and we try to step in here and fill that gap.
Yeah. So in my opinion, a startup is at a maximum 5 years old. But I've tracked down also a lot of, I think, over 250 supply chain startup, and you have tracked it down a bit more already. But maybe you can tell us about, the founding of startups. So when did they have been founded, and how it has progressed in the last few years?
Yeah, happy to do so. So when we look at the data and what we track with our database, the good news at first hand is that founding activity in the sector has increased over the past years, right? Whereas like when we look at 2010, 2011, 2012, there were barely new supply chain startups. So logistics and supply chain in general was not a huge topic amongst founders, and innovation was super hard there. Then things kicked slowly off, and in the recent years have become more and more attractive. In this data we've presented here, we see a peak and a spike in 2019 and 2020, but that does not give any reason to worry, or not much reason to worry, because it is natural that freshly founded companies are less visible. So you can assume that the numbers slightly higher in Europe in 2021 and also 2022 than we've tracked here, and the companies are still in stealth mode sometimes, and just like iterating on their ideation phases still, and get visible over some time. But in general, the message is that I think supply chain is becoming more and more relevant as a sector for startups, as well as there are many problems to address, and also many great solutions out there.
Yeah, and also I have checked down also a lot of startup. I've done that since 2017, 2018, and what I've seen, and we'll get also to that point. Still after the lockdown, we have seen a lot of traction. So in 2022 and also in 2021, but especially 2022, a lot of companies, popped up out of nowhere. So the founding is getting back, like we just said. Maybe you can mention something about what kind of categories have you recognized in your research.
Yeah. Happy to do so. So when we look at founding activity in supply chain, and it makes a lot of sense to look at the time before 2020 and after 2020. Before 2020, and we'll get to that, why that makes sense in a second. But before 2020, we see like supply chain visibility as the hottest topic. So tracking goods and tracking container ships and so on. So there are companies like Shipeo and Bakeo in France, but also, which is not included in our database, but another company originating from that area, you could say, is Project 44. And supply chain visibility was a hot topic back then, but what you also see is a lot of companies being founded in freight and shipping. And what that means is, for example, all these digital kind of freight forwarding tools that make that are either like digital freight forwarders directly or provide platforms for carriers and shippers to match, and also procurement. So it's basically digitizing existing processes and digitizing what historically was done manually. But in general, what you can see here also is that innovation happens in all areas of supply chain, right? With freight and shipping, procurement, and visibility being the top categories, there's new interesting solutions popping up for every problem there is in the market, basically.
Yeah. And what we saw before COVID in 2020, there were a lot of translations of startups from the B2C environment, like Uber, transgressing to the supply chain. So you had Uber Freight, and Uber Freight tried to cross over from the US into Europe, and they failed massively. So there were already some freight matching platforms available in Europe. So that was the main funding money was going that direction then before the COVID. So in 2019.
Yeah, that is true. You also see this with European players, right? You have Sender, you have Photo, you have Beacon in the UK, and all these companies are in the end digitizing the existing business, but are freight forwarders. The service they provide in the end is freight forwarding, right? They have a more digital interface, and they try to automate a few processes, but in the end, this is freight forwarding, and this is also what Flexport in the US, for example, does, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Flexport has raised a lot of money, and don't go into that because I'm not so impressed about what they have under the hood if you compare it with the technology of the European competitors. And if you go to move forward in time, so here you see, sustainability is only 6.1%, and supply chain visibility 16.5%. So that's more, way more. But if you look at the next figures, it has changed.
Yeah, it has changed drastically, and there has been a few external shocks, you could say. Like first of all, the most relevant one is for sure COVID, right? But there's also like the war in Ukraine, and also a few regulatory changes, right? And with sustainability, for example, we see two aspects happening. First of all, the awareness is increasing in general, so also in all societies. But on the other hand, you have specific legislation and regulation kicking in. You have the supply chain due diligence acts, right? That are going live in all the countries. And sustainability, let's not forget that, is not only emission tracking, which is like a huge factor and a huge part, but also things like supplier due diligence, right? Know your suppliers. And on the other hand, what we see in the more recent data, and that is more related to the external shocks we see, is that planning takes a top position right after sustainability, right? And you can I think relate that to companies trying to be more efficient, to make better inventory decisions, and also like trying to mitigate the risk and the disruptions they experienced in the past 2 years when it comes to goods being not available or shipments being not available and out of stock became a real issue, which hasn't happened all these years before, right? So becoming more efficient in terms of planning and forecasting and getting like a better overview is a huge topic for many companies today, next to sustainability, of course.
Yeah, and regarding planning, I have also tracked down a few amazing supply chain planning startups and scale-ups using all kind of machine learning and AI for better forecasting, but also to prevent bullwhip effects. Translate this planning to different parts of the chain. So not only forecasting internally, but across a whole chain. So there you see a massive progression in the way of planning and forecasting. We get to that later on with one of the contestants of last year. So you see that supply chain planning with the use of machine learning AI has evolved massively in the last few years. And you will also see it in our maturity matrix. The category of supply chain planning has evolved drastically in the last year in a positive way. So I think that a lot of established supply chain planning tools should be aware of new kids on the block, and that's one thing. Another thing is sustainability. So Hope, I think that Responsibly is in the sustainability area and also in supplier management. So how do you put yourself out there in this graph, Hope?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, absolutely, we are focused on sustainability, but sustainability within the supply chain. So it's a really nice overlap, I think, in both the surgence and need for better supply chain management tooling, as well as the regulation that's coming about that Markus mentioned, and the need to really do proper planning around that from a risk perspective, but also from a supplier relationship management perspective.
Yeah, and Markus, I have been through your handbook, very rigorously, in the last time, because I've also used it for our own maturity matrix next to our own analysis. On one thing, it's quite hard to determine in which category a startup is falling and what they are addressing, and it's sometimes blurring. So even when you look at this graph and you have warehousing, transportation, in the end, even in your startup handbook, it's kind of blurring. Sometimes you don't know where to put it.
Yeah, that's true, and there's always some kind of an overview, right? What we do in our database and also in the handbook is that we offer companies to pick one main segment, so where they position themselves or where they feel themselves the best positioned, but then they can also choose sub segments, right? And this is what Hope just said, right? Like Responsibly takes care of sustainability and ESG aspects, but that of course in relation to, for example, supplier relations and supplier management, right? So of course there's always some overlap between different areas here, and you can't divide that super sharply.
No. Let's talk about the funding. The economy has changed when you compare to a year ago. Can you tell me about the funding in general and the funding in the supply chain?
Yeah, happy to do so. So, like funding in general, and this is no secret, I guess. So, funding in general for startups is getting more and more difficult this year, but also a little bit getting back to normal, right? We saw these record years with also record valuations and record amounts of money being pumped into the ecosystem in 2020 and 2021. And in 2022, it slowed down a little bit, and now we see a lot of fear in the market, a lot of investors being hesitant to deploy new money. So in general, it's becoming harder for startups. But we see a little bit of an opposite effect, or like a mitigating effect, for the supply chain segment. So the supply chain segment, in the end, could be a relative beneficiary of this status, because supply chain management is becoming more and more relevant. It becomes more and more relevant on the sustainability part of things, because like emissions in the end, for example, come to existence in supply chains, right? But also on the other hand, when you try to make your company more cost efficient and to change processes there, supply chain is usually a good part to start with. So we see these both like opposite effects, and what we see in the graph here is we compared funding data end of 2021 to beginning 2022, with the data we saw in the last 3 months, and there was not much of a change, and that doesn't mean that, I mean, I don't want to paint the picture too positively. That doesn't mean that the times are not getting hard for supply chain startups, but it does definitely mean that in other areas it might be even harder. And so far, we still see funds deploying capital for good startups and for good supply chain startups, especially.
Yeah. Of course, and 2 years ago, the interest rates are very low, around zero. So you could borrow free money, I would say, and invest it in startups. And now things have changed. In the Netherlands, it's up to 3% already. So that has a massive effect. And what you told me before the start of this webinar, Markus, but still a lot of money is still stuck in assets. So there's not so much liquidity. So that is also some part that there is on the negative side.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like there's two effects. Like one is there have been massive amounts of venture capital raised by funds over the last few years, and this money is still out there to be deployed. But for funds like being founded right now and getting into existence right now, and and that also has a forecasting value for the next months and the next 2 years of money being deployed. It is a lot harder because nobody expects exits this year, or no good exits at least, and so liquidity is not getting back to the funds so easily anymore, and therefore that also means that the times are getting a little bit tougher for a few years maybe. But still, good startups will always get funded, and supply chain has, like, I think, a macroeconomic push in the long run.
So the good news is you are starting your own seed fund, and I know another fund from Switzerland for another series A and B for scale-ups is being started this year. You know, so there's the good news coming up for supply chain startups, I would say. Um, you know, so this is the presentation of the maturity matrix we have done at Supply Chain Media. So this is what we have been doing since 2018. In parallel, what I mentioned, the SCM Handbook has been doing with Markus and Mathias. So I'm not going through all the starters over here, but starting from the left, we start on the supply side, supplier management, and then supply chain sustainability, ocean and air freight forwarding. So that was a huge place where Forto was coming in Europe, but they're already older than 5 years, so they are not on this graph anymore. And then we have inventory counting and process optimization, tracking and tracing, and blockchain. And then we have demand planning and forecasting. That's very rapidly growing with a lot of very promising startups and scale-ups. We get to that later on. Then transport planning and visibility. That's on the road and road and rail cargo area. Then road, rail, and freight matching. That's the marketplace. So there used to be a lot of them over there, but they're already raised way longer than 5 years ago. And on the right hand side, you have last mile delivery. And now you even get startups in a reverse chain. So that's not last mile, but reversed mile, I would say. I don't know how to call it. So that will be maybe a next category popping up, but we haven't included that one over here. And you see in the red box on the left, you see responsibly, and we put them in the supply and management area. You could also question, in sustainability, but we asked them, who are your main competitors in the startup and scale up field? And if you are mentioning each other, you will probably have to be in the same category. Hope, are you happy with being in the supplier management, or is it more supply chain sustainability where you would be put?
That's a tough question, Martin. I mean, it is supplier management for sustainability. And of course, we want to make it easier for you to make procurement decisions in general. So easy integration into your other metrics is the goal.
Yeah. And maybe the supply chain sustainability category is dominated by vendors, by startups and scale-ups providing carbon measurements and sustainability reporting on carbon measurement and that kind of stuff. So that's how you could describe like Sweep, CarbMe, and Big Mile, for example. So so that's a different area, but we get to the later on. Hope what you're doing. So that's slightly different proposition than what Responsibly is providing.
Absolutely. Sustainability is such a large area.
Yeah. So maybe we have to rephrase it with the carbon measurement or something like that. Okay. So now what we did, and then we get and maybe some. I get a question. I don't see supply chain planning management in the maturity matrix. Are those category placed under different headings? Well, demand planning and forecasting, I think that's the area where you see a lot of innovation in supply chain planning. So maybe I don't know if that's addressing the question of someone from Connexus. So I think that So Flowlity, Garvis, and Pelico, those are scale-ups in the supply chain planning area, and you see a lot of startups over there. So to get an answer to that question, I think that that category is what we call demand planning and forecasting. In general, you see this kind of startups starting in that area in forecasting using machine learning, and maybe later on they try to translate it in supply planning, and maybe then to combine it, you have supply chain planning. All right. So what we did since 2019, we asked all the startups and scale-ups in our database, so I think 250 of them. We asked them 10 questions. Basically, it's green, orange, or red. So from the top to the bottom, how is your visibility in media? So these are all questions about the commercial pipeline. So here's visibility. Are you visible to the market? Do you have commercial leads? Do you have potential customers? Are you talking to them? Do you have prospects, signing a contract? So how hard is it to get them paying? So first you have pilots, and then you have paid implementations. And then the next question is, how easy or how hard is it for you to collaborate with partners in the industry? And then how unique is your solution? And then we ask them, how easy is it to attract new people? And then the next question is, how easy is it to attract new funding and investors? And the last question, how hard is it to expand internationally? So these are the questions from 2019. So overall, very much green. Visibility was quite all right. Commercial leads, a lot of them. Potential customers, a lot of them. Still, they had some difficulty signing contracts, but sometimes startups don't have the right touch to tell the story in the right way. So they're convinced about themselves and that kind of stuff, and maybe they are more convinced than the possible prospects. But what amazed me is uniqueness of the solution. All of them, most of them said our solutions are unique, and we have seen a lot of competitors. So you just presented me a very, well, what you call a unique solution, but in the end I've seen this solution before, but you haven't seen it. So Markus, do you see the same, that the startups are very convinced about their own solutions and think they are unique?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it's hard to say if startups really see it that way, or you always have to try to, if you make sales, right, to towards investors, but also towards customers. Of course, you want to push your own solution, and you want to put an emphasis on differences towards other solutions, and your own uniqueness, not on the similarities. But yeah, and in general we see that, and we see that not only startups compared to each others, but also compared to like freight forwarding is a good example, right? Compared to incumbents and established players. So sometimes uniqueness is a little bit overly optimistic evaluated. That's true.
So and regarding attracting new funding, it was a mixed bag, then. But maybe I think most of the money went to the freight matching platforms, what you mentioned, and I also asked this question to a lot of niche players in unique environments. But when you go to the Corona area, a lot of red. Commercial leads. The pipeline was drying out. And prospects, were retracting and that kind of stuff. So that's what we saw in Q2 2020. So it was getting negative. And although what you have found it out, Marks, a lot still startups were starting. Maybe I don't know. But the trend was very negative. So you have seen that there were some startups founded by them. How do you match it with this kind of data, Markus?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of insecurity in the market and uncertainty, right? And a lot of people worried, and there was like a lot of very pessimistic scenarios. If we remember, like the first months of European lockdowns, there was some very pessimistic scenarios, and in the end, I think like times of crisis are still good times to start companies, right? And in the end, things haven't been as rough as expected by many. And I think like it's always a good time to found a new company, right? And that's also what we saw in the data, right? And that established players and established companies and also like startups that have been around a few years have been a little bit more pessimistic. I think that is true. There was a lot of worries about budgets for new solutions and for innovation and so on. But I think it turned out pretty well compared to what was expected.
Yeah. And then, last year, Q1 2022, we did a similar survey, and a lot of green compared to the year before. So green on the potential customers, paying customers was getting better. Um, easiness to attract new employees, that was only the biggest worry a year ago. And, Hope, you started a year ago at Responsibly. So what's your take on attracting new people?
Yeah, I mean, I think one advantage that maybe the sustainability space has over other industries is the sense of impact that potential employees are driven by. And luckily for supply chain as well, there's a huge sense of impact there. But I think particularly within climate tech during last year, it was really hot and and continues to be hot and a way for, or rather a big interest area for
Yeah.
those seeking employment.
Yeah, I think so. And even now, when we go to the data of this year, it's getting a bit negative. So the visibility in the media is less than last year. And collaborating with partners is a bit on the negative side. And what we saw already, the easiness to attract new employees is even a bit more negative than compared to a year ago. Well, here you see the easiness to attract new funding is getting on the negative side. So even in supply chain, so that's the theme or the common feeling over here. But internationally, the expansion, that's the positive side. So I think it's a mixed feeling. I think that and I talked to you, Hope and Markus, earlier, that we get a sense that a lot of companies, possible customers of yours, Hope, they are a bit worrying, how will the year look like, how will the economy evolve this year. So I see it myself. It's like, we are in the middle of a storm, a hurricane, tornado, and we don't know if we're getting at the outer side of the tornado. Do we get an uplift or a downfall? So there's a bit of uncertainty in the market. What do you see, Hope?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned to you earlier, Martin, I think that there's quite a few companies now that have abandoned the forecast planning for scenario planning.
Yeah.
Because, you just want to be prepared for all sorts of different options. And it's really hard to, forecast in an uncertain environment.
Yeah. All right. But one thing for certain is that we will be organizing a European supply chain startup contest. The finals will be on May 11 in the Netherlands again. So this is the overview of last year. So we had our Innovate supply chain event in May. And this is the Q2 overview of the startup contest, the contestants. So basically, the highlighted in yellow startup scale-ups are the ones who were actually on site at our event. So we had 30 of them. So that's one thing. And the highlighted in red are the finalists of the startup contest. We get there shortly. So Hope, you were there at our event. So what was your take on last year's event?
Yeah, no, I mean, for me in product management, it was a gold mine of potential customer feedback and thought leadership from a lot of the industry leaders and challenges that they face, which is exactly the sort of thing that I need to hear in order to continue to build out solutions.
Yeah. And maybe if you compare to the actual maturity metric of this year, some areas like in the ocean freight forwarding, you see now more established players like Wakios and Cargo, Beacon. They are too old to be mentioned now. They are more established, I would say. But you see newcomers everywhere, so that you still get this new vibe also this year. But maybe to get to the contest itself, because then we get to the point. What is the contest like, and what is the jury looking at, and how do you evaluate startups and scale-ups? And then we'll also ask Markus, how do you evaluate startup scale-up to possibly invest in them? So these are the three finalists of last year. So if you look here, Responsibly is on supplier management. C-Trace is sustainability, tracking of all your raw materials, and Garvis is an S&OP forecasting tool with a lot of machine learning and that kind of stuff. So these are the three finalists of last year. So here you are, Hope, the winner. So you were the winner, and Thomas, you're founder and CEO on the right hand side. But maybe Hope, you can tell me about how did you win? So what was your pitch last year? So tell me, so what is Responsibly doing? And take it along. Do your pitch.
Yeah, sure. Great. So Responsibly was founded back in 2021 with a single focus: empowering procurement to make every purchase in the world responsible. Our founder that you see there, Thomas Anderson, he previously built a company dealing in freight management. There, he immediately noticed a lack of solutions available for easily tracking sustainability as another metric, just like price, in the sourcing decisions made by their customers. And that led to the journey that brings me here to you today. So, where's the opportunity? 80 to 90% of a company's footprint sits with its suppliers, and that stretches across vastly different ESG areas. Everything from deforestation and biodiversity to forced labor to diversity and inclusion. Regulators, investors, customers, none of them will accept a lack of action going forward. That brings me to the problem. Sustainability data, as I'm sure most of you have witnessed, and in particular, supplier sustainability data, is messy and disparate, which makes it both time-consuming to collect and analyze. Additionally, it's almost impossible to retrieve the insights needed at scale with old-fashioned methods, which are either completely dependent on questionnaires and or lack continuous monitoring capabilities. In comes Responsibly. We are a sustainability analytics platform that empowers decision-making by allowing you to perform supplier due diligence at scale. Responsibly allows you to aggregate your supplier's ESG profile with instant materiality mapping that identifies its risk exposure, and through automated research, which allows you to tap into the data landscape before even having to engage your suppliers. You can guide buyer actions and decisions through tailored assessments to match your own company strategy and monitor linked KPIs over time. So let me tell you how it works. All of this is supported through our connection with hundreds of publicly available databases, websites, and reports, as well as the translation of millions of data points into a composite score used for ranking and comparing suppliers through the Responsibly data pipeline and scoring framework. Lastly, you can empower your suppliers to make improvements through seamless engagement, transparency of analysis, and guidance on how to reach the next steps in sustainability. In short, Responsibly automatically extracts, processes, and analyzes the data you need for instant feedback in your sustainable sourcing decisions. This leads to reduced cost and effort for your organization as a whole, with a scalable and repeatable due diligence process, and ultimately the ability to achieve your sustainability goals.
All right, this was the winning pitch of last year. So, kudos. This was the one how Thomas did it on stage for a huge audience. But the thing is, next to this pitch, there was a jury, and this is this year's jury. from left to right, that's me, all right. So as part of the jury, Jean-Baptiste Clouard is the founder of Flowlity. That's the winner of 2 years ago, in supply chain planning or forecasting. The guy in the middle, Joost Bouws, is the former COO of Action, and Action is Europe, across Europe, and now because he ended his job last year voluntarily, and now he's an investor and an advisor. So he's now looking into supply chain startups as of now. Mathias Bosse, he's the business partner of Markus. He's the founding partner of Prequel Ventures, and he was also part of the jury last year. And Thijs Gitmans is also investor related to the Rotterdam Harbor. A lot of investments in sustainability, but also a lot of in transport and logistics. What you see here, unfortunately, 5 males. So last year we had 2 female members of the jury, but unfortunately the 2 female members can't make it this year. So in the matter of gender diversity, we should improve for next year. But it is what it is, and we want to have the jury members on site. So next to the pitch on stage, we will have assessments by the jury on site, on location. So that is what we want to have. We want to have an eye-to-eye conversation with the contestants. And the purpose of this whole startup is to promote and develop entrepreneurial creativity and innovation within startups in the supply chain field. And Markus, I think this is related also to your fund, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. That's also our goal, right? To help building innovation and innovating in the field, and helping to accelerate also these developments in these companies.
Yeah, and I think so Joost, for example, he was supply chain director of a largely growing retailer across Europe. So he has been to growth, and he was also approached by a lot of vendors, small vendors, large vendors, of software applications. So he was aware of what his needs are or were back then by supply chain software vendors, established ones and scale ups. So he knows what's happening in the field of the possible customers of all these startups. And what are we looking for, and what are our 4 criteria? So basically this is last year's sheet. So you have your 3 contestants of last year: Garvis, Responsibly, and C-Trace. And as a jury, we are looking to the contestants from 4 angles. First is the commercial opportunity, and the next one is the level of innovation. The third one is the practical applicability, and the 4th criteria is the clearness of message. Hope, I think as a product officer, I think you know all these 4 angles. So what's your take on those 4 angles? Do you have
Yeah,
a similar
absolutely.
matrix for yourself?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the commercial opportunity, it's always a collaboration with the business development team. But right, it's really understanding the needs in the market. And if you can build a solution for that and then validating that with the customers in the market. So the money can't be there. So the commercial opportunity can't be there if the product is not actually solving a valid use case.
Yeah.
Same thing with the level of innovation. You continuously do that. That's 100% product management, continually finding ways to solve the needs of customers, and it has to be in a usable way,
Yeah.
a user-friendly way. Otherwise, why would somebody bother switching from the way that they're doing things today to your application if it's going to make their job harder?
Yeah. You talked in the previous conversation we had about the cost of switching. You see a lot of, especially multinationals, big companies with huge IT portfolios, invested a lot of millions of money, euros and dollars in this application, and they are aware that they have to change and improve. But if the cost of switching is so high,
Yeah.
it will be a huge hurdle to apply and to implement these kind of new tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see it all the time with these huge enterprise applications where they need a whole training force behind them. And I'm of the mindset that the software, the application you're using should primarily speak for itself.
Mhm.
It should be easy to use and also easy to onboard and continuing to add new information into it or get information out of it.
Yeah, and when I have a look at most of the new applications from these startup and scale-ups I've been, presenting in my maturity matrix, I see a lot of user-friendly interfaces. It looks like like apps. So this new kind of applications are way more user-friendly than the huge ERP system of 10, 20 years ago.
Mm, yeah.
And another thing is about level of innovation. Now, I was just curious, since last 2 months, ChatGPT is very hot, and also Responsibly, has been using a lot of scraping technology, across the internet. So, what is ChatGPT doing for you?
Yeah. I mean, Chat GPTP or sorry, GPT
Yeah.
is great at branding at the moment, and I mean they're a great tool. There's so many different AI tools out there, and it's the latest one that has been trained on a very large database. And so I think the really cool thing about that is being able to apply that sort of technology to all the new applications in the relevant context. So in the
Hmm.
context of supply chain management or in the context of sustainability. And so, of course, we're always exploring new ways to continue to make things easier for our customers and in the application, such as instant feedback on those sorts of things, or having the guidance on what to do next in sustainability.
Yeah.
And you always need to balance that with, okay, there's going to continuously be new technologies coming out. Does every new hot technology fit my use case?
Yeah, and we have published articles in the last 12 years on supply chain movement, but not most of the content is not publicly available, so not available for ChatGPT. So we're gonna do a test of our own knowledge base with a chatbot like ChatGPT, and ask a specific question about supply chain startups, etc. And we will compare it, the outcome, with an article written by ChatGPT on open source on the internet. And then I'm convinced that our content is way better than the ChatGPT version of what they are going to describe about a certain question I will do on supply chain and startups. Last point here, we haven't mentioned it yet, but the clearness of message. I get a lot of input from startups, and my main question always is, what is the main problem you are going to address with your solution? And don't make it too vague. Make it very specific, so your potential customer will recognize, that's my problem I'm having, and that's the final solution. So the clearness of the message is I think the biggest challenge for a lot of startups and scale ups, especially startups just being founded. Don't think that you can solve all the problems, because your potential customer won't recognize it. So the clearness of message is I think a key point. Marcus, how do you see it? You have been through a lot of input from startups and scale ups for your handbook. So what is your take on the clearness of the message?
Yeah, it's a huge differentiator. Also, but by the way, I hope you can still hear me well. It seems I have a little bit of connection issues, but
No, that's
but
fine.
it is a huge factor for sure. And we see that with freshly founded startups and founders.
Now we lost you, but we get to you later on. Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
Or is it
Yeah. So clearness of the message is a huge factor. So selling exactly why, what problem are you solving, and why is it wise to use a new tool. And you have to make sure that you're not only making it possible for experts to follow, but make it very clear, make it very simple, and make it understandable for everybody.
Yeah, right. So we get to the process. So here are the deadlines, and how we get to the finalists, the 3 finalists. So our deadline is March 20. So we have approached all the startups and scale up in the maturity matrix, and also some of them extra who we were not able to position in the matrix because we didn't have a category, like reverse supply. That's a startup addressing the reverse chain of e-commerce. So there's not the last mile, but the reverse last mile, I would say. So please enter the contest. So here are the deadlines, and here are the dates of for ourselves, the jury, and basically you see May 11 is a very important one. So you have to be on site in the Netherlands to pitch. So that's one thing. But you are also, if you are entering the competition, if you don't make it to the final three, you also are able to present yourself with a small booth. So you will be there, and like Hope said, you will meet your peers, other startups over there, and next to that you meet hundreds of supply chain experts, decision makers from mid-sized to large companies you can talk to and convince them to at least look at you and look at your solution. And there will be a lot of investors walking around, from investment funds or personal investors. So there's a lot of traction to be made over there. So that's the timeline of the process of the contest. And why should you enter? Like I said, you could present yourself, but at our event itself, there are a lot of possible customers, possible investors, and peers of other startups. And Hope and Thomas were the winner of last year. So as a winner, we will provide you a marketing communication campaign to put yourself on the map. So Hope, what is your feedback on what's happened since you have won this contest?
Yeah, I mean, one thing about being a startup is that you want to focus a lot on the product and making sure that you're solving the initial problems of your customer base and innovating from there. And so at times marketing can go by the wayside. So it was really great to be able to kick off this marketing journey with supply chain and media, and then take it off from there. And so now we're focused a lot more on that as a team, and have kicked off other campaigns. But yeah, last year this was a great beginning of it.
Yeah, and if you compare to startups in the US, I've been to Silicon Valley, and American startups and scale-ups, especially well-funded scale-ups, put a lot of money into marketing. Even sponsoring the Super Bowl, that kind of stuff. And maybe that's overshooting. But if you compare it to the marketing of European startups, there hardly you have any funding for marketing. It's guerrilla marketing. But in the end, if you have your funding, you have to do some marketing. You have to build campaigns, and we can help out. But the main thing is create your awareness, your interest, desire, and action, from brand awareness to leads. So that's something what we are helping out the winner, of course. But I think a lot of startups should be aware to do marketing in a different way, and that's what we did with Responsibly, for one thing, but also with previous winners like Windle and Flowlity. Help out to create interesting content. So like with Responsibly, we created a roadmap, and we published it in the magazine, we published it online, and this roadmap has been downloaded a lot of times, so you get your contact details. So we helped out Responsibly in a very practical manner to put them on the map. All right. We have a few minutes left for some questions. So from the audience, feel free to ask questions, and I'll pick it up. And I have some questions. So Hope, what is your main challenge as of this year? For Responsibly.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're not unique in that we've been affected by the macroeconomic environment. I mean, the business case is there and the need is there. We've definitely seen that, and definitely have the interest from customers. And on the funding side, however, it's we've seen a bit more conservatism, I would say, in the space. So again, nothing unique to our position, but definitely a lot of exciting things happening on the product side. We've had several large releases this year for new modules, and the product is a completely different beast than what it was a year
Okay.
ago. In fact, we just had another big release today, which I'm psyched about. So
All right.
big things coming.
All right. And can you tell me a bit more? So what's new about this new release?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the beginning of the year, we've always been focused on really allowing procurement leaders to prioritize which suppliers to look at for issues. And then complete particular objectives around sustainability. So in the beginning of the year, we launched our decarbonization
Yep.
module, because Scope 3 is one of the largest area for emissions, and
Yep.
it's also the most challenging area to tackle. So now you can easily see supplier emissions across the board. Right on the back of that, we launched our huge risk module, so you can now get instant feedback on risk exposure, hotspots across social impact areas and environmental impact areas across your entire supply chain. And today, we just released the overview to see whether or not you're compliant with the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act,
Okay.
and look forward to adding in other legislations from there. So yeah, we're pretty psyched about the momentum we've had.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I think I'm also a bit amazed about this addition of this kind of modules in such a short time. So you have one a year ago or less than a year ago, and you have evolved massively, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great team that I get to work with.
Yeah, and I've been to Flowlity in Paris in the first week of January, and they were the winner of 2 years ago, and they've just launched a new module about resilience planning next to their forecasting. So I saw that some massive developments in a short time, and also with the use of machine learning AI, you see a lot of rapid developments over time in the last year. Marcus, so what is your biggest challenge for your Prequel Ventures of this year?
Yeah, for Prequel Ventures, like I mean, our biggest goal and challenge right now is managing a first closing of the fund. So we are fundraising ourselves. So far, investing as angels, as business angels, Mathias and myself, and of course, we wanted to institutionalize that. And we see, on the one hand, many great opportunities in the market, but then on the other hand, you see many corporates and also high net worth individuals and then family office being a little hesitant with putting more money into venture capital. So we see this great opportunity on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, not always an easy environment on the fundraising side. And our biggest challenges is going to be to balance that, right? But we're very confident that we will manage that, because we believe in the opportunity there that we have.
Yeah, and one thing, on May 11, on our Innovate Supply Chain event, a lot of people will be there, so there will be a lot of positive vibe. It's an event compressed in one day. We have great keynote speakers, supply chain executive. We have a former commander-in-chief of NATO forces who will talk about real scenario planning in a VUCA world. So and we have great pitches on stage. This event will take place in a huge movie theater complex with different movie theaters, a main movie theater, and we have a hall with startups and scale ups, and also established innovative partners, vendors. So there's a lot of energy going around in one day. So that's one thing, a lot of vibe, and I hope that this energy, positive energy and vibe, will connect all the people like yourself, Marcus, and Hope, and others, that you will progress. So that's the thing. I'm positively sure that will happen on May 11. So we at the end of our webinar. So right after this at 5 o'clock, Hope, Marcus, and myself will be in the lounge. So if there's some further questions, or you want to talk to one of us personally, we'll be sitting at table 1. It's like a Zoom meeting, so don't be afraid. Just click on a chair, and you will be in a Zoom meeting. So then we'll be there with the next 30 minutes to have another 30 minutes of conversation, if you would like to do that. So for further information, on the left-hand side, you see a maturity matrix, the latest version of Q1 2023. And in the middle, you see the roadmap we have developed together with Responsibly. So a roadmap for decarbonizing your supply chain. And on the right-hand side, you see the cover of the SCM Start-ups Handbook 2022. So we will get the link in the PDF. Here you see the contact details of Markus and the contact details of Responsibly. And with that, I would like to wrap up, and I would like to thank Hope. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Markus, also thank you for your explanation, and thank you for your comments and insights.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Martijn.
You're welcome. And, I will thank you, the audience, also the people who are listening to the recording. Thank you for joining and listening in. And thank you for, connect with us. And the ones who are joining, thank you for joining in the lounge. And as I said, next week, we will have another webinar. Next Wednesday will be International Women's Day. So we will have a webinar about gender diversity in the supply chain and how, especially men, can improve gender diversity in supply chain. So that will be the topic of next webinar on next Wednesday. So thanks for now, and see you later, hopefully next week, or maybe I see you in the lounge right after this. Thank you, and bye-bye.